pad, in the writing space, and then you post it. Then later, when it's question and answer time, our moderators will be reading the question, and then the facilitator or the speaker will be answering them directly. I think when we do that, we're going to have a smooth ride. And welcome all of you. I'm really happy, and we're really happy to host you and feel at home. Thank you. Meanwhile, you can invite your friends and give them reminders and let them join in. Thank you. So guys, let your friends continue joining. We're only giving an allowance of 5 minutes, and immediately after 5 minutes, our presenter will be starting. So by exactly 5:10, we will be starting. So continue sending your friends reminders and stay cool. Don't quit. Don't leave the meeting. And then personally, my name is AJ Bull. I'm the national officer for Standing Committee on Human Rights and Peace, commonly known as SCORP. So I'm the national officer for SCORP Kenya. It's under MSAKE, that is Medical Students Association of Kenya. And we're really happy to host you. So stay safe, feel at home, and let's invite our friends. Thank you. So guys, it's exactly 5:10, so I propose we start. Now, welcome to our webinar for World Refugee Day. As you know, today is the 20th of June, 2020. 20th of June internationally is known as World Refugee Day. It's a day that is used to commemorate the strength, the courage, the resilience that all the millions of refugees face all over the world. So today our presenter is Anne Ndungu. Anne Ndungu is a lawyer working with the Kenyan government, and she's also working with the UNHCR, and she's working in close conjunction with refugees and the protection unit. So she'll tell you more. She'll tell you more about herself, and I would like all of us to welcome her by being attentive and listening. And in case there are questions and answers, which we will give time later on, you will type them in the space provided. Thank you so much and welcome. Welcome, Madam Anne.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Here you can hear me. I'm not sure you can see me. For once, I must acknowledge I'm reaching that generation that says technology is not your strength. In fact, we could be a bit late because I delayed a little bit with technology, but I think there's a small window where you can see me, I hope. So, as Bull has said, my name is Anne Ndungu. I work with UNHCR, that's the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, but I also work with the government of Kenya closely. Um, it really is a great honor and privilege to be talking to you this evening. I was even wondering, how do I greet you? Are you medics? Are you healthcare workers? What do I say? But whichever way, I am very happy to talk to you. And especially during these COVID times, where we greatly appreciate you, healthcare workers, whether you're in school or you're about to finish, we are truly happy to be with you. And as Bull has said, June 20th, we celebrate refugees. That does not mean we don't celebrate them every day. We celebrate them every day, but specifically today, so that it's a global call for everyone to remember who refugees are and their resilience. So, because we only have 1 hour to talk, I'll just read for you one paragraph by our High Commissioner, that's our big boss for refugee issues, where he says on World Refugee Day, I salute and celebrate the fortitude of refugees and displaced people around the world. I also pay tribute to the communities that shelter them and that have demonstrated the universally shared values and principles of compassion and humanity. They have sometimes hosted and protected refugees for years or even generations, and continuing to uphold these values in a time of pandemic is a powerful message of hope and solidarity. So whoever you are, whether you're a medic, a Kenyan, an American, or whoever you are in our country, it does not matter where you come from. Every one of us can make a difference, and every action truly counts. And that is our theme for this year. Every action counts. Even by your presence on this webinar, for us, we are truly honored as the UN organization and the government that deals with refugees. So again, I have said we're greatly honored to be talking to you today. And I will have a brief presentation. It's going to be a slideshow. But as I speak to you, I want you to think about what is your role, either as a medic, as a healthcare provider. What also is your role as a Jack's classmate, what AJ's classmate or friend? What is your role? Think AJ representing other displaced persons. I understand you people are human rights, also peace affiliated organization, which is very good. So in that role, what action are you taking? And also as a Kenyan, as an East African citizen, as an African, what are you doing? So those are a few of the questions that I would ask you to reflect as you go through this presentation. And I am really hoping that I will be able to, again, technology not failing me, I want to present a five-minute video. I hope it will come on. If not, I have shared the link with AJ to share with you, but let me just try and play it. If it doesn't work, he'll signal me on phone. So give me a few minutes. So I want to present now. I hope it will work properly. My entire screen to you people.
We can't still see your screen.
Sorry, guys, it seems then I was just entertaining myself. One minute, did you see anything? Hello?
No, we didn't see anything.
So you didn't even hear anything? Aha, good.
Yes.
I see somebody has said they have watched the link. Can everyone please take, even if it's 5 minutes, just to watch that link, please? AJ, have you shared with everyone?
you can
Uh-huh.
present.
And
Use
then?
the presentation option.
And then?
Yeah, it will show the video on your computer.
That's what I did. It didn't show. And then let me try.
Present as window and play the video.
So you do it on my behalf. Can you do it on my behalf?
I am unable to do that because I am recording the meeting. So yeah, it has to be
But the
done from
person who
another
says
end.
they have watched, can they help us?
Yes, I guess so.
There's somebody, let me see. I don't know what their name is because I couldn't check the tab. They say they have been able to see it. Let me try and see. Is Benjamin helping us? Good. Blessings to whoever has done it for us. And why has Central Intelligence joint is somebody's logo? Are they watching? Somebody had started presenting it. Yeah, then I think they just disappeared. Somebody had started, they had put it very well. I don't know why on my side it's refusing. It's showing I'm sharing, but it's not. Can you people watch now?
Guys, the video cannot play because of the size and it's not so clear. So we're going to proceed immediately. So let Madam join in again. She's coming right now. So stay put, please. So meanwhile, if you cannot be able to get her voice or any question or anything throughout the presentation, you can use the chat column here to type in your views and send them. We'll get to view them, all of us, and it will be rectified immediately. So let us just
Cynthia,
give her.
guys, I'm back. I don't know what is happening.
Welcome.
Anyway, so now let me talk because the link has failed, which is very sad because what I wanted you people to see is what is currently happening globally in terms of displacement. So you will watch the link later. Please promise me to watch it because for us as UNHCR, every World Refugee Day, we release the statistics. So as of today, we have almost 80 million displaced globally. So we have about 79.5 million people who have been displaced. I will explain to you when I say displaced. So they are outside either their area where they were born, like if it's in Kenya, maybe you've been displaced from Kisumu to another area, or you have been displaced into another country or territory. This indeed is a worrying figure because from this figure, we have 26 million refugees globally, We have 45.7 million internally displaced persons. We have 4.2 million. I will explain to you people what this means when you have people displaced in such a magnitude. But just to break down these figures nicely for you, it shows that by the end of last year, we had about 26 million refugees. And out of this, 11 million people were people who were displaced for the first time. As in, this is the first time they are leaving their areas where they come from. So 11 million people is indeed a very huge figure. So, and now please note, in 2019, 11 million get displaced. So we have some who return to where they came from. So last year we had 5.6 million displaced. This is who returned home, sorry. This is not out of the 11 million. It is a cumulative figure. Some may have been displaced a long time ago. So in a nutshell, what we are saying, as of today, 1% of the world population has been forced to flee their home. Not you wake up and decide globally you're moving to another place. You are forced. You are forced. And now, interesting enough, these figures I'm telling you of displacement, particularly of the refugees and asylum seekers, 3 out of 4 people who have been displaced actually move to the neighboring countries. So if I'm a Kenyan and I'm being displaced, I move to Uganda, Tanzania, or my nearest country. So that's what happens in terms of displacement. And that's why you'll see globally, most of the people who have been displaced are either in developing countries or countries that are not doing very well. So again, as of our statistics last year, 2/3 of the people who have been displaced, out of that huge figure I've given you, that's about 90 million, come from 5 countries. And surprisingly, before last year, 2 of these countries were our neighbors. So now 5 countries are producing the most people displaced in the world. So these countries, just for your information, we have Syria with 6.6 million. We have Venezuela with 3.7 million. You have Afghanistan with 2.7 million. Myanmar, an interesting area of displacement, 1 million. And you'll be surprised, South Sudan has 2.2 million. Before, Somali was also one of the countries that were producing many refugees. So as of 2018, when we had 5 countries producing the greatest number of displaced persons, 2 were actually our neighbors, Somali and South Sudan. So that is just a global synopsis that I wanted you to know. But now, closer home, Kenya is hosting almost 500,000 refugees. And when I say 500,000, these are the ones who are registered with the government and UNHCR. So there could be others who are displaced but have not gotten an opportunity to register. I'm sure most of you, especially if you know AJ very well, then you know Kakuma camp. So in Kenya, they are hosted in Kakuma camp or in Dadaab. Those are the designated areas. But also we have quite a number of them residing in the urban areas. So Kenya has about 500,000. The majority are from Somali, followed by South Sudan. And then we have DRC, Ethiopia, Burundi, Sudan, Uganda, Rwanda, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and you'll be surprised, a few from the Middle East. We have Yemenis, we have a few Afghans and Syrians, but very, very few. So, because thanks to my technology, which have taken a lot of your time, I will quickly just explain to you what the UNHCR mandate is. Our mandate is to offer international protection, because the person who should give you protection should be your state. Your state is obliged to offer you protection. And protection, I'll explain to you, it's just all activities that are aimed at ensuring full respect for rights of individuals in accordance with the letter and spirit of relevant bodies of law. So whether it's a right to registration, to food, to accommodation, to peace, to all that, it's your country that should do that, your state. So when your state is unable to do this, this is when now you're displaced. And because as a human being, you're entitled to these rights, then now the international protection comes in, where now protection is offered by another state. So now that is the role of UNHCR. We work with now certain governments, for example, we work in Kenya to offer international protection. And so 2 key mandates, we offer international protection, and because we assume to be a refugee should not be a permanent state, we also pursue durable solutions. So you are displaced from your country or displaced within your country, but this should not be a permanent thing. So we have 3 traditional durable solutions, which I am sure questions will arise, so I'll give you more details then. The first durable solution is voluntary repatriation. That is when you see people going back to their country of origin. You have resettlement. A few people are lucky to get residency that may end up being permanent in 3rd countries like America, UK, and other countries. But these are very, very, very few. They're not many. And then we have another one called local integration. The country where you have sought asylum ends up taking you in and even giving you status. I'll use AJ, unfortunately. If AJ were to remain in Kenya for long, and now that our constitution has even changed, and he marries a Kenyan, many years down the line, and the law would allow him to receive residence or to now become a Kenyan citizen, that would happen. So that is one of the durable solutions. Also, our work as UNHCR is to work with governments to give them strategic directions on how to help people who are displaced, and also to empower people who are displaced. I mean, assuming I'm seeing there's Esther, there's Enoch, assuming you're displaced from Kenya and you go to another country, that doesn't stop you being Esther, being Enoch, with the skills, with the knowledge that you have. Medics about to graduate, that doesn't change. So when you're displaced, we have to empower you to be able to use these skills. And also, because you still remain a human being in a community, we have to work with you to solve some of the problems that you are undergoing and you go through. So I'm sure some of you, when you met AJ, you just thought he's your neighbor from South Sudan. Fair enough. It's the same thing when you meet a Chinese, when you meet an American. If you're a government official, half the time, and I'll use maybe a police or an immigration officer, they just see this person as a foreigner. Others may just say this person is an immigrant. So our mandate as UNHCR, does it cover everyone who has been displaced or not? No. We have people who we are mandated to work with, and they're the ones who hit that population that I told you, 79.5 million. So these are known as persons of concern. So the main one you hear is refugees. So briefly, and even if I speak very fast, I'll give AJ a PowerPoint presentation that he can share with you, so you can also get this information even when later for you to peruse. So an asylum seeker is a person of concern to us. So an asylum seeker means there are problems in your country and you want to seek asylum. So again, let's say 2008, when we had our post-election situation, some of our brothers crossed the borders to go and seek asylum. So before they crossed the border, they had the intention to go and seek asylum because of the ongoing problems in our country. So at that point, you're called an asylum seeker. So when you have now crossed the border, you are in your new country, you're seeking asylum. So there are processes that take place, usually within the governments or with the UNHCR. Interviews are conducted. We see, is your intention genuine to seek asylum or not? Then the status is conferred on you when the government now recognizes and says you're in need of international protection. So now you change from being an asylum seeker to a refugee. And why it's important to know this is because in certain countries, they have different kinds of rights. If you're an asylum seeker, your right may be different from a refugee. So those are asylum seekers and refugees. Internally displaced persons, it's exactly what the word says. You're in your country, but you're internally displaced. So when the status changes and you can go back to your country, you are now returning to your country. So we call you a returnee. Those who know a lot about our Kenyan country, there's a community called the Makonde. 2 years ago, they were granted citizenship and they became Kenyans. So before they were granted citizenship, they were stateless persons. So there are people globally who don't belong to any state. Can you imagine such a life? No state acknowledges you as their citizen, which means you don't have a birth certificate, you don't have a passport. You know, simple things as even getting married won't happen. Simple things as going to school. Right now with COVID, you can't even benefit from the social protection because ideally you're stateless. No one knows who you are. And everyone has a right to be recognized. So those are people who we also work with. So now, refugees. Like, for example, in Kenya, we have hosted refugees even before we got independence. We may have called them something else, but we did host people. Uganda had problems in the 70s before all of us were born. We hosted them. So it is something that has been happening for long, but it has to be regulated universally and globally. So how do we do this? We do this using international refugee law. I am a very good Catholic, so I shouldn't use words that are termed blasphemous, but we have a statute that's like the Bible of refugee law. It's called the 1951 Convention on Refugee Status. So this 1951 Convention, it's like our Bible. We cannot even give it any other name, though it had a protocol in 1967. So as much as it is 70 years old, this international treaty set for us the grounds for managing refugees. So for example, it defined who is a refugee. So a refugee is different from a migrant, from anyone else. It also gave us the standards within which we must treat refugees. So, and because of this 51 convention, when I'm working in Tajikistan, when I'm working in South Sudan, when I'm working in South Africa, the definition of a refugee will still remain the same. It is somebody who has left their country because their government is unable or unwilling to offer them protection, which has led to them being persecuted on certain grounds. You just don't wake up and say, I am not happy with maybe this particular ruling party or something, you know. We have now the legal grounds that you must meet. So you must leave because you have a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of your race, your religion, your nationality, your membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. So those are the grounds that will make you be recognized as a refugee. And as I mentioned earlier, to be a refugee, you should have crossed an international border. As long as you're still in your country, then you're considered internally displaced. Once we cross the border, then you now become a refugee. So now, that is at the international level. Students of history, which you guys are not, will tell you in the 1960s when we had the Pan-Africanism movement and then we got independence. So now we're looking for solutions for African problems. And you'll be surprised at that time, there was a lot of displacement within Africa, be it because of foreign invasion, which colonialism and all that. So we also came up with our own statute. It's the 69 AU Convention. So regionally, we also have our own conventions that guide us in how to manage refugees. Now, you go lower. Kenya as a country has its Refugee Act 2006, which currently we are reviewing. It is in Parliament for the second reading. Then you have like your Citizenship Act, you have your Constitution. All these help us to manage and protect refugees. But you people are students of human rights and peace in your organization. So international refugee law does not work in a vacuum. It has linkages with human rights. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, madam.
I had a power outage. Yeah, but now I'm hotspotting, so we could be good. So I was talking about the Kenyan law. So even in Kenya, we have our own refugee statutes that help us with protection. It has its own challenges also to review it, to at least be in tune with what is happening globally. Now, there's international human rights law. Those are laws that accrue to you by just virtue of being a human being. Then we have something else also called international humanitarian law. So international humanitarian law is also known as the law of when there's war. When there's war, certain things happen. For example, if you're a civilian, you cannot engage or be targeted if there's a war. So that also guides us. And then there's international criminal law. So criminal law is what you people heard about, people being taken to the Hague, ICC. All those come together when you want to protect refugees. You will ask me why I'm talking about international criminal law. Yes, everyone has a right. It's your human right. It's in the Universal Declaration that you are entitled to seek asylum. However, there are some people who may be involved in such heinous crimes that when you go to seek international protection, no one offers you that protection. Times happen. So even to be granted protection, there are some people who just will not be given protection. And that's where now the international criminal law comes in. So in the interest of time, I'll just tell you people certain key things that happen when you're dealing with a refugee law. For example, we have something we call the cornerstone of protection. It's a French word which means non-refoulement. Non-refoulement simply means if somebody is fleeing persecution, we cannot send you back to that country where you'll be persecuted. You have seen countries in developed states building walls and, returning people at the borders. That shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen. So that's something it's something we try to avoid at all costs. Actually, during this COVID situation, we are almost very stressed because there will be maybe instances globally where people who are in need of protection will not get this because borders have been closed. So assuming you want to leave Kenya to another country just on travel, you'll need a visa, you'll need passports. But seeking asylum is one of the activities where you don't need a passport, you don't need a visa, and you should not be penalized for illegal entry. So because the way war happens usually, no one tells you we're about to fight you, and our grandmothers in the village, they don't have passports. So assuming there's war and you need to flee, you don't have the relevant documents. And when you're fleeing, no one tells you this is a designated border you should come through. So there's a likelihood you'll not have the documents, you won't enter through the right border. So you should never be penalized for that. Unfortunately, it happens. People do get arrested and you're told you're illegally in a country, but you should not be penalized for that illegal entry. So that is one of the key things. But that doesn't mean you just come into a country and stay like that. You have to present yourself to the relevant government authorities. And yes, there should not be discrimination just because you are a refugee or you're displaced. Easier said than done. AJ and others can tell you it's easier said than done. We have faced discrimination. We still continue to face. Sometimes it's just out of ignorance or people just don't understand what happens. And then asylum is a humanitarian nature. Even when you look at our OAU conventions, humanitarian nature means exactly that. It's not to be used to flee, for example, prosecution. I have committed a crime in my country. Instead of facing the law, I want to flee. Or I'm fleeing to go to another country so that I start war there. That is not what it means. So this is something totally humanitarian. And so when you think of refugees and refugee protection, because I think 2 years ago, our theme for World Refugee Day were refugees, people like you and I. Refugees, people like you and I. It's just that we find ourselves in different circumstances. So some things must go on. They are there in our 51 conventions. They are there in our regional conventions. They are there in our laws. For example, refugees have the right to go on with their lives as normally as possible. So you should have the right to work, to associate, to have a family, to follow your religion. You know, sometimes people ask me, oh, so refugees can marry? I mean, who says refugees can marry? 2 weeks ago, we were watching on Zoom, we were following a wedding between a Kenyan and a refugee. And my niece asked me, she doesn't look like a refugee. So some people use terminology like a normal refugee. So one asks, who is a refugee and how does a refugee look like? So refugees have their right to go on with their lives as normal. And again, when you're in a country, you have to abide by the obligation and the rules of the country. So you have to follow all the laws in the country. And most important, you cannot engage in rebel activities. You can not be involved in serious crimes, because this will definitely affect your rights as a refugee. So now, I will just talk for 10 more minutes. In Kenya, together with the government, what are we doing for refugees? Because we've said every action counts and everyone must do something. So something key we must do, because it's taken for granted by others, is to maintain the asylum space in its humanitarian and civilian nature. I have told you refugee and asylum is purely humanitarian and civilian, which means the government of Kenya should create an environment where refugees can easily come into the country, stay peacefully. So the asylum space should be maintained. Sometimes space can shrink when we have such draconian laws that our refugees feel they cannot continue to stay here. And the converse is, like, for example, our camps, they cannot be used to destabilize the country. We have camps in other countries where now rebel groups come and arm each other. So that shouldn't happen. And so we work closely with the government to ensure that at least we have an environment where refugees can continue to live in peace. And also, we work again closely with the government to ensure that refugees are able to achieve a durable solution. You guys are members of peace organizations and such. How can somebody be able to return to their country if the conditions there are not conducive? It's not possible. So we work regionally. We are not involved directly, but we work with other UN bodies. And now Kenya has gotten that non-permanent seat in the Security Council. That will definitely be an angle where we try and bring peace within the region so that refugees can even be able to return back. AJ can go back as a doctor to help rebuild South Sudan. And in the cycle of displacement, when refugees are still in our country, we should ensure they benefit from basic services, including health, education, water, everything that nationals are benefiting in. Now, and of great significance, over the years, we have seen the change. Before, it was refugees kept maybe in designated areas where they get full assistance, food, education, all paid for by the donors. But now we know this is changing. Refugees can work, they can be able to provide for themselves if they are given the right environment where they can enjoy economic inclusion and self-reliance. You'll be surprised at the income generated in Kakuma and Dadaab camps. If this comes as tax to our country, everyone will be able to share. And also, globally, people have acknowledged that most refugees, again, continue to reside in areas that are either not very well developed, or those countries are really struggling. So in 2016, UN member states came together and made commitments on how we can better manage and assist governments that are hosting refugees, deal with something called burden sharing. That's a principle. How do you share, this burden of hosting refugees? For example, Kenya has hosted displaced persons for more than 30 years. That's a huge burden. So as we speak now, we're talking about something called the Global Compact on Refugees. This is now how we are working together with private sector, with many other people, to see how they can be able to host and assist countries that are hosting refugees, as well as the refugees themselves. So key objectives of these are just to ease pressure on the host countries and to build self-reliance of refugees and expand access to solutions, especially resettlement and something we called complementary pathways. Complementary pathways simply means things like labor migration, or you go to another country because of sports. Remember, we had the refugee team in Kenya. You go for education purposes, and then you are able to reside there permanently. And then, as I had mentioned earlier, we continue under the Global Refugee Compact to ensure that refugees can return to their places in safety and dignity. Because I see we are at almost at 6, I would like to stop there because I can speak too many things about refugees. So, but I cannot end without talking about COVID-19, because that is now the buzzword on all our mouths, on everything. So as it is, COVID situation started as a health pandemic, but now we are seeing there are issues of poverty, issues of gender-based violence, issues of economic instability. And we are seeing vulnerable groups and populations are being greatly affected. Of course, here our refugees are greatly affected and impacted, also just because of the nature of our camps, how they are. So some things like social distancing and just the communal nature may also impact on the containment. But what we have seen that's very impressive, again, COVID is not choosing. So as UNHCR, as the Kenyan operation, we're very, very impressed by what we have seen, between the host community, the refugees. Refugees are making masks, they're making soaps. In Nakuru, some refugees have even given this to the border riders. So it is amazing what is going on. And that's why we are saying in our theme this year, it doesn't matter who you are, you can do something. Every action counts. So even for you people, just the interest of getting to know who are refugees, what is UNHCR doing, what you can do in your own roles, for us, that is an action that counts a lot. So I will beg to stop here because I can talk a lot about refugees. So I'll give you a chance to maybe ask your questions. I hope I'll be able to answer them. And then as we conclude, maybe you can even use a chat or talk to tell me what action you will take to assist with refugees. So I will hand over again to AJ to continue with the program, but I'll share with you people the PowerPoint presentation.
Hello guys, thank you so much for the entire program. Thanks also, Madam. Now on the question and answer section, Nicodemus March has asked the question. Hello, Madam, is integration of refugees currently happening in urban areas?
So, when you're a lawyer, you can now become very legalist. So let me speak a little bit about integration. There's the de facto, and then there's a de jure. De jure is by law, and de facto is by fact. So ideally, integration, when you look at it from the legal aspect, is full integration where even your status may change. You may become a resident or a citizen. So there are various tenets of what integration is. There are social, there are cultural, and the economic aspects. So in terms of when you think, forget the legal integration, when you think about the factual integration, we can say yes, there is integration in the urban areas, because in the urban areas, you will find the refugees residing in the same place like the Kenyans. They use the same services as the Kenyans. A few have intermarried, so they have Kenyan children. So ideally, there is some form of integration in the urban areas. And also that the government, even in its statistics and discussions, acknowledges there's a significant number of refugees residing in the urban areas is a form of acknowledging integration. But we'd rather use the terminology inclusion, because we are now working with the government to say, please include refugees in the services you offer, so that we don't have parallel systems like what we saw in Dadaab and Kakuma. We had like education, health, there were parallel systems different from what the host community had. I hope that answers your question, which was a good question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Now, the other question is from Jeremiah Sindo. The question is, hello, in the case where a refugee doesn't show up for registration by relevant authorities, will they still be considered as such even after, let's say, more than 20 years, or an illegal immigrant?
Okay, good question. Now, the law as it currently is says you must present yourself within 30 days to a government officer or UNHCR. You know, it is just goodwill to show I am here to seek asylum. It's just goodwill, you know, I'm here. So the law says the 30 days. And in 2015, we had a situation that even went to court, because that time the government wanted you to present yourself immediately. It is not very easy. So if you don't present yourself immediately, there's a proviso that allows you to give an explanation. But again, the explanation needs to be reasonable. For example, within 3 months, I didn't present myself because I just entered the border. I was sick. I had just delivered. I didn't know who to go to. So you're given a leeway. But 20 years, to be honest, that will not fly. Because 20 years, it's not even reasonable to live in a country for 20 years without either declaring yourself to a government officer. And the nice thing about asylum, you don't have to go and look for, sorry, I should have told you this, my mistake. In Kenya, the government agency that's mandated to deal with refugees is called the Refugee Affairs Secretariat. So you don't necessarily have to take yourself to the Refugee Affairs Secretariat. The chief in your area is enough, Nyumba Kumi, police, they will guide you to the right place. Thank you.
The next one is from Uncle Metho's House of Africa Comedy. As we're talking about COVID and refugees, what's the plan for UNHCR and the government of Kenya to help other affected countries to resolve their problems, so that we do not have a big number of refugees in the future, considering that Kenya has taken again the UN membership for the coming 2 years?
There are comedy clubs amongst the medics. Anyway, on a more serious note, I think there are two questions they're trying to ask there. Something about COVID and about preventing refugees from coming in future. Let me start with the second part of the question. Earlier on, I said to seek asylum is a human right. Everyone has the right to seek asylum. So the interesting aspect is everyone has a right to seek asylum, but do all the countries agree to grant you asylum? Again, debatable. So what now Kenya has done, and when they were campaigning for that non-permanent seat on the Security Council, they even used the fact that they are hosting 500,000 refugees in the country. Actually, let me try and see if I can read what they used when they were seeking that position. So, in terms of humanitarian action, our government said we reaffirm our commitment towards the protection of refugees with regards to future large-scale refugee movements, as well as to existing protracted refugee situations, including realization of the social and economic rights of all persons of concern. Which means the Kenyan government has still reaffirmed its commitment towards hosting people who are displaced. So we will not close our borders to displaced persons. However, because of that seat now we have in the Security Council, now we can try, hopefully, to try and bring peace. Very difficult. I keep on saying you don't bring peace. You try and work towards, is it alleviation? You guys have the better terminology. So they try and prevent conflicts. Sometimes you can tell when a conflict is about to start. So they work with those countries in the region to try and prevent the conflict, and better still, to develop those countries so that the refugees who are in a protracted situation, that means you've been displaced for very long, more than 15 years, 10 years, then you can be able now, areas where you came from can be developed. Because if the areas are not developed, to be honest, people are not going back. So our position at the Security Council then will help us work with all other countries to try and bring peace in those countries, and also find solutions for people who are displaced either within their countries and into the neighboring countries. Over. And also, sorry, there was the second part of the COVID part, right? So now, in terms of COVID, we continue to work with the respective governments wherever UNHCR is. We work with the government. And as I mentioned before, when it comes to vulnerable communities, it's better to prevent or to delay the medics, these words fail me. When a case has been discovered, to delay, so we prevent, and then we try and delay, and then containment. So, for example, in our refugee camps, we have trained the healthcare officers. We have set up like the isolation quarantine centers. We have assisted, like soaps and all those things. So that is what we are doing. Thank you.
Now, the second last question. Anne, awesome presentation. Please talk more about the issue of urban refugees in Kenya who seem not to be focused very much by the mainstream UNHCR, but only RAS, given that South Sudan is an intimate neighbor to Kenya. Isn't it the legal system that is more discriminatory than the refugee status or displacement causing factor?
Is that a thesis? That question is very complex. Just repeat it again.
The question is from Bior Garang. An awesome presentation. Please talk more about the issue of urban refugees in Kenya who seem not to be focused very much by the mainstream UNHCR, but only RAS. Given that South Sudan is an intimate neighbor to Kenya, isn't it the legal system that is more discriminatory than the refugee status or displacement causing factors?
Before I answer, shukran for the compliment, but please unpack legal system. Which legal system? The Kenyan legal system entirely or the refugee system? Let them answer that, then I'll continue.
Okay, and then the other question is from John. Hello, madam. Great presentation. My question is on education. What is the government and the UNHCR doing to provide more education opportunities for refugees, especially post-secondary education?
Let me go back to Bjorn's question because he has explained it's the legal system. So now, assuming I was not working for UNHCR, many Kenyans on the road, especially in the last 2 years, they would see those cards with SSD, CE, Central Equatoria, South Sudan, you know, Malakal, and other places that I have had the honor of working in. So most of these people would just say these are South Sudanese in this country. And as I mentioned, displacement does not change who you are. South Sudanese, by their nature, dress well, they are flamboyant, like our Luo communities. So anyone seeing a South Sudanese on the roads would not know whether this person is here as an East African citizen or a refugee. And now this is now what brings us back to what you're asking about the legal system. So we have a significant number of South Sudanese in Kenya who are here by virtue of them being a neighbor to Kenya, being a member of the East African community. So these people are here on their passports. But the others who are here as refugees under the UNHCR and RAS mandate, those ones, I would not say they have been abandoned by UNHCR. When they do come to our offices and seek our services, we do help them. But also as a practitioner of refugee law, what we have noticed amongst the South Sudanese community, they're quite self-reliant. So they only come to us rarely, maybe to update their documents or such, but they seem to be self-reliant in the urban areas. Now, that said, I will speak a little bit about the urban population, just so that you are clear as we live here. Kenya as a government still continues to perpetuate something called an encampment policy. So they expect all refugees to reside in the designated areas of Kakuma and Dadaab. So anyone residing outside there, i.e. you're an urban refugee, you are ideally supposed to be self-reliant. So you should be able to meet your rent, you should be able to meet your food, your school, all those costs. And that's why sometimes you see in the urban, our interactions with refugees are limited in terms of what assistance we can give them. We can help with skills development and such, but apart from that, day-to-day assistance, we may not, except for very, very, very few vulnerable cases, very few, we may not be able to now help. But also now, Bor, just to tell you, and it happens to many of us, we notice that some South Sudanese, not all of them, sometimes will run to their government for help. And when it comes to refugee law, ideally, you should be one track. Either you are with the people offering you international protection or with your government. So I hope that helps for now. There was a question on education. Okay. What was the question on education?
What is the government of Kenya and UNHCR doing to provide more education opportunities for refugees, especially post-secondary education?
Okay. As a refugee practitioner, that's one of the areas we really, really grapple with, because we have so many bright refugee children, just like Kenyans. Primary education ideally should be free, so we can work on that. But when it comes to post-secondary, then that becomes a challenge. As UN, we continue to seek funding and scholarships. Now we have even moved to private sector to see if they can sponsor our refugees. So that is one area of the funding. We try and do that. But most important, we are working with the government on inclusion of refugees in our tertiary systems, because as most of you will know, you can never even get admission through the Joint Admissions Board. It becomes a Herculean task. So we are working on a policy. It's at a very advanced stage with the Ministry of Education to see what else we can do in terms of education.
The other question is from your Monica. Hello, thanks for that clear presentation. I would like to know what the UN is doing in collaboration with the government of Kenya to help our young girls from sexual assaults. I'm sure the rates of teenage pregnancies are hiking. What they are exposed to other life-threatening problems, like they might lose their lives at giving birth. How can we help protect this group?
Monica, thank you for this question that touches on sexual gender-based violence. And as I answer Monica, she talks about girls. I want all the men in this forum to know that boys are also victims of GBV, but as Africans, the way we are socialized, I hope Central Intelligence Agency is one of us, eh? Is it, before I continue? Hello?
I think he left.
Okay, but he's one of you guys. Okay, fine, because he's whatever keeps on popping. So as I was speaking about gender-based violence, it cuts across both men and women and girls, but of course the bigger percentage is amongst girls and boys. So sadly, COVID has shown us how there has been an increase in gender violence, which has also resulted in some pregnancies, as we are seeing. So as UNHCR, what we are doing is, number one, trying to increase modes of communication so that if somebody is being assaulted or they have problems, they know who they can reach out to. Whether it is our partners or UNHCR, they know who they can reach out to. Then also some of these issues are coming up, the violence, because of economic reasons. We may not have money to help everyone, but there are a few very, very, very vulnerable people who we are trying to cushion during this time. And of course, education on the rights, creating awareness, how to respect each other. So that is something we're doing. We have tried to see how to mitigate when this happens. How do you help with the health aspects? How do you help with the legal aspect? It becomes a long shot. We've seen many people try and resolve this using the traditional systems. We are saying no to this because it's the victim that suffers a lot. But what we do is we try and give holistic support. But the key word is communication. Find who you can talk to, and also to keep ourselves busy. The more idle you are, then people get lured into some of these activities. We can talk more and more on this, and we have GBV protocols, and of great importance is we are working closely with the government in terms of GBV prevention and mitigation.
Thank you. The final question is from Angok Dengtial. Great presentation, Anne. And please, could you talk much on illegal arrest of refugees by Kenyan police in urban centers, which we saw as undermining refugee rights to stay in urban areas?
That question is spot on. That is what we grapple with every day. In my very quick and hurried presentation, I spoke to you about non-penalization, non-discrimination. So sometimes we even have jokes the way we do something called focus group discussion. We go to the community, we talk to the refugees, because our programming should be guided by our beneficiaries. So they tell us how they think we should program. So one of the things they tell us is some of the police see refugees, they see ATM machines. So I see you, I'm going to arrest you. So what we do, we train the police. We train them and tell them who refugees are, and they have the right to be in the urban areas. And don't just arrest somebody because they are a refugee or they don't have the right document. Get in touch with us as UNHCR and RAS, and we'll vouch for whether that person should be in the urban area or not. So a number of cases have been resolved even before going to court. So we are able to resolve, and we have a toll-free helpline. When you are arrested, you call us. What sadly we see, especially among certain communities, and when it's a woman who is arrested, they are quick to pay the bribes. Of course, this perpetuates the give and take. But we continue to work closely. We have training sessions for the police. We have good relationships with the magistrates. We have lots of training sessions with them. However, I have said again, refugees are not above the law. We have certain refugees who feel just because I'm under the UN, I can break the laws, I can defy the COVID restrictions. For example, we had, when the government had said no social gatherings, we had a wedding of 30 people. They were arrested, including the bride in her dress. So really, when it comes to such times, it is very difficult for us as the UN to try and say, so and so is a refugee. And then we've had even incidents where our refugees have even fought the authorities. We as Kenyans cannot fight the police. So that way we will not assist you. But illegal arrest, yes, that goes on. And of course, it undermines the asylum space. We try and even discuss it at high levels with senior police officers. But yes, you still get the errant ones. Thank you.
Bior Garang is saying, thank Annie, that was helpful, well noted. And thank you guys. This brings us to the end of our question and answer section. And as a last remark from Madam, before we have the vote of thanks from Yasser will give the vote of thanks. So as the last remark from Madam, kindly mention the state of South Sudan as a member of East African Community and free border crossing access. Thank you.
You medics, are you medics or are you lawyers or are you political students? So, why isn't Kenya government allowing South Sudanese free border crossing like Rwanda and Tanzania? Interesting, they're not allowing you free access? Okay, that question we can discuss at a higher level. But what I saw interesting enough was South Sudanese law students who've studied law in Kenya, then they wanted to practice at the bar. Then they were told they are not considered like East African citizens. And there was a long, long debate. We even went to court through Amnesty International. And what we were being told is that something like we needed to change our Advocates Act to have the Southern Sudanese also acknowledged there. So it was a long, long winding story about changing a certain act, but they were able to practice. So Kenyan government allowing South Sudanese free border crossing like Rwanda and Tanzania. So now you see, I think it's somebody at the immigration, and this is something, again, there's usually a conflict of law between immigration and refugee law. Is this South Sudanese crossing the border as a refugee or as an East African citizen? If you're crossing as an East African citizen with a valid passport, you should be able to cross. Also, if you're crossing as a refugee, you should be allowed access, and then you just declare you are coming to seek asylum. So I think there is just somebody misinterpreting the law, but it's something I can also try and find out or discuss at a higher level.
Thank you so much.
Before I finish, questions of passports always come in. It is a passport is indicative of your government offering you protection more often than not. So it is assumed when you come to a country and you are a refugee, your national passport ideally shouldn't be so useful. Though I do train people, when push comes to shove and the police is arresting you, show them the passport. But in terms of refugee protection, you shouldn't 1 foot be using your passport, 1 foot be using your refugee ID card.
Thank you so much. Let's have Yasser.
Thank you very much. For the very, okay, let me introduce myself. My name is Hamza. I'm a fourth-year medical student from the University of Nairobi, and I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of Bull, who is also the National Officer for Standing Committee of Human Rights and Peace, and MSAKE, Medical Students Association of Kenya. A big thank you to you for this insightful session. Indeed, we learned a lot, and especially during this this pandemic that we're going through. We know that it's always the vulnerable who end up suffering, and it's always the vulnerable who have to succumb to the conditions, the economic conditions, not beyond the disease itself. And as doctors, we play a very important role in identifying their situation, empathizing with them, and hopefully also intervening and possibly find out whether if they're at the major risk of the disease, that's the group you're supposed to aim at, and help them out and ensure that they have good health outcomes. And indeed, this has been a really good session, a really productive session, and we have all benefited from it. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for all the knowledge you have given us. Knowledge is power, as they say, and we hope to also use this same knowledge to empower in our careers and even have a deep understanding of refugees and human rights. Thank you very much, Madam. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Yasir. I'm really, really, really gratefully honored to have spoken to you people. I promise to go and work on my ICT skills. So I will share the link you will get later through AJ, but I'll also share with you my PowerPoint. And through AJ, if anyone has any questions later, you can always ask me. And thank you, AJ, for the hookup to the medics. It was my dream to do medicine, but something happened somewhere along the way. So I'm honored to have met all of you online.
You see the advantage, you're still able to, despite you not doing medicine, you're still able to play a really huge role in our lives and educating us, and we're really grateful for that. So you still have achieved your dream. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before AJ.
Yes.
Are we done or they are still on?
No, we are done.
Oh, good. Okay. So you have finished the link.
All right.
Yes, so I'll share the link to everyone, also including our WhatsApp groups and all those people who would really want to get to know it, they will, because we have a lot of platforms to share. And also, I'll also share the link to our Facebook Live. This recording was live on Facebook, so I'm going to share the links everywhere. And this brings us to the end of our meeting. And thank you so much, guys. Thanks for being patient, and have a lovely evening.
Yes.
Same to you, AJ, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This is a message from the Office of the Director of the National Intelligence Service. We want to congratulate Madam Anne Ndungu for such a good initiative. Raising awareness is the first step towards coming up with a solution. We will ensure to work with various stakeholders such as the UNHCR to ensure that the voices of refugees are heard. Indeed, a person's most useful asset is not a head full of knowledge, but a heart full of love, an ear ready to listen, and a hand willing to help. We will make sure to resettle them in other countries where safety is guaranteed. We ensure to do the best we can in our department to ensure refugees are provided for in terms of food, health, and education, and for the war perpetrators, justice will be served. Thank you.